Hi, my name is Amanda Swanberg. I'm an attorney in St. Paul, Minnesota, and today I'm going to go over the joint petition agreement and judgment for decree for marriage dissolution without children. That's available online for free on the Minnesota Court's website. First, of course, you have to do the disclaimer. As this video can be accessed by anyone, nothing I'm telling you today consists of legal advice. Unless you've signed a retainer agreement with me, I do not represent you. I don't know the details of your situation, so I cannot advise you as to whether or not this form would be a good fit for your situation. This form and the information I am providing is valid for Minnesota only. The laws are different in each state. If you are considering using or have decided to use this or any other free court-provided form for your legal action, it's up to you to decide whether or not it is the best form to use, and it is also up to you to decide if handling your case on your own is a good decision. As a side note, it's not an all or nothing choice, which people may not be considering, that you can do most of it yourself and then just make an appointment to speak with an attorney, and you will have to pay an hourly rate for that. Most attorneys aren't just going to hand out advice for free, in-depth advice. So you'd have to pay for it, but it would still be a lot less expensive than hiring an attorney to handle your case from start to finish, including all the paperwork and all of that. But there is a medium ground that you need to be aware of. In this video, I will go through the Minnesota Court's pro se form for a joint petition for dissolution without children. You can find this and other forms on the Minnesota Court's website. Because I'm not going to... It's a long link. I'll just say you can find it. You can Google it, Minnesota Courts, joint petition without children, and you probably get pretty close to it. I'll put a link to this form on my website, swanberglawoffices.com, on the resources page. And this is the form that you will use if you and your spouse agree on all the issues, and if you don't have any children. You do need to agree on everything. If there's any disagreement at all, or you think, well, the judge could decide that, then this isn't the form that you can use. So I'm just going to kind of go through these sections. To begin with, it's pretty self-explanatory. What's your name, address, date of birth. I'll go over that confidential form 11.1 later. It's pretty simple. Again, it's just kind of there's a big header on it, the same header you could cut and paste from this one. Header being this part up here where it says your name, and then it's just basically your name and then your social security number. That's to keep it confidential because these forms are available to the public once they're filed, so you don't want to have that personal information on there. It's housed in a separate file that cannot be presented to someone who just asks for a copy of your divorce decree. Again, same thing with wife, children. Now, if you have any children, as part of the marriage, this is not the form you should use. Obviously, they kind of get a little sarcastic while you're using the wrong forms. If you have any adult children that are dependent upon you because of a physical or mental condition, especially if it's a joint child, you really need to talk to an attorney. There could be a lot of issues there. You need to protect yourself about child support. Child support goes on until they're able to support themselves. If they're never going to be able to support themselves, it goes on forever. You need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of how to maybe protect the money that you're going to leave for those children, so it's in maybe a special needs trust. There's just a lot of issues you need to be aware of if you're getting divorced and you have a child with special needs. Going on here, if there was a child that was born since the marriage, but it's not the husband's child, again, that's a touchy area. You just want to make sure it's handled properly, especially if you're the husband, because if you're the husband, you're the father, unless there are some steps taken. And you want to make sure the right person is responsible for paying child support. So if you have any question as to whether or not that's your child, you might want to get a DNA test. You might want to discuss it, but I would recommend figuring that out before you go through with the divorce. Alright, so here's more information about if you're sure, like let's say you separated years ago and you knew that she was, as the husband, you knew that your wife was with another man and they're kind of building their own life, you can just go through this process here, the non-paternity statement and things like that. Again, it's just another level of detail. Okay, 4 and 5, those are pretty self-explanatory. Armed forces. If you're an active member of the armed forces, then there's some extra protection for military, so people can't file legal action against them when they're serving, because they probably aren't going to get the paperwork in time. There's been an irretrievable breakdown of our marriage, so standard. No fault divorce. Your physical living situation. Sometimes due to the economy, people are still living together even though they want to get divorced. And the court just wants to know about that. It's best to not have other proceedings going on when you file this divorce. Courts don't like that when you have multiple actions going at the same time for the same issue. It's kind of a waste of resources. So if you've started one, I would look into just finishing it there, or maybe talk to an attorney about it and see what your options are. If you have any domestic violence in your relationship, if there was an OFP or an HRO in effect, you want to make sure you acknowledge it here. The courts just want to make sure if there's an imbalance of power that the abuser isn't kind of strong-arming the other person into this agreement. So it's kind of just an extra warning, heads up that they need to look closely at the details of this agreement to make sure it's fair and that one party wasn't taking advantage of the other. If you are on public assistance, you definitely need to, right here it says to contact either the county collections and support office. You need to make sure that they know about the divorce because they have an interest in making sure one or both of you are self-supporting and can either get off the assistance. Like for example, if you were split for a long time and you've been on public assistance but your spouse makes enough where they can provide spousal maintenance, then the county might step in to help you. Again, here's the employment, number 12. Just a lot of information here about your job. This is important if you're going to be doing anything with spousal maintenance. They want to make sure you can support yourself, and they want to see if it's really imbalanced, because there's the husband and there's the wife. Let's go through that. Okay, healthcare. Who has what? Spousal maintenance. Now, spousal maintenance, if you need spousal maintenance, even if you're going to agree on it, you should still talk to an attorney. Even if they aren't going to handle your whole divorce, you really need to talk to an attorney to find out what would the courts probably do, what are they going to look at, what do you think is fair, how should you structure it, is there a way to do the asset distribution so you don't have to have the spousal maintenance. There's a lot of questions that you need to look at, and you want to know that you're agreeing to something that is fair under the law. Of course, you can always do whatever you want. I mean, sometimes people give more than they need to or would be required to. That's totally fine, but you should know what the law thinks before you decide what you're going to do. You don't want anyone feeling, betrayed later when they find out, I could have paid a lot, I should have been paying more, or I should have been paying less, or he really shortchanged me, things like that. Name change, totally fine for the most part. If you have a conviction, there's a few extra steps. And then this is the agreement. The first word is all the facts. This is the agreement. Real estate. If you have real estate, attachment C is at the end of this document. How real estate is divided can cause some really big problems down the line. And it used to be easy back in the day when your house was actually worth more than you paid for, and so if someone was going to stay in the house, they could just refinance it, get the other person off the mortgage, no problem. Well, now, maybe your house is underwater, maybe you just refinance it, and you can't do it again for, a certain amount of time. Maybe one person can't afford on their income to qualify for a refinance. You need to know what are you going to do, and what are you going to do if that falls apart. Maybe you're saying, I trust my husband to keep making the payments, so I'm going to move out and my name is still on the mortgage, but I trust that he'll keep up. Oh, he lost his job, and you don't have any kids, so you really aren't in touch with him, and before you know it, oh, guess what, now your credit is tanked because he went into foreclosure. Or you want to buy your own house down the road in a year or two, and he still can't refinance it even though he's current, and you can't qualify for your own house because this mortgage is still eating up your credit. How are you going to work that? You need to know beforehand. You don't want to just agree to it and then have to be sitting here with an agreement that doesn't leave you, or that leaves you unprotected. Alright, non-marital property. This again is another issue that people don't really understand that well. Non-marital property does not mean it's just it's in Bob's name and so it's not mine. No, if he bought it during the marriage, and if he bought a motorcycle during the marriage, it's half yours. It doesn't matter that he bought it, that it's his name on it, he's the only one who rides it. If he used marital funds to buy it, it's half yours. It's a really complicated area, and if you have things that can be both marital and non-marital. For example, if the wife owns a house before they got married, and she lived there, she bought it, with her own down payment, and she lived there for 5 years, and then she got married, and he moved in with her, and now they've been making joint payments for 10 years. Now they're going to get divorced. Well, part of the house is non-marital, and part of it's marital, and the math to try to figure out what that is can be kind of difficult sometimes. So it depends on how well you get along, for one thing, but that would be something you'd really want to talk to an attorney about, because it's no longer a 50-50 split. It can really get complicated. The same goes for things like if you got an inheritance from your family and you put it in a savings account or like a money market account and you just left it there, that's different than if you got that same amount of money and you put it in your joint checking account and you bought things with it. So it's a complicated area. You need to check in with an attorney to make sure you understand what is marital and what is non-marital. And another area that people get confused about is like 401ks and retirement accounts. And if, again, Bob, let's say, Bob works at 3M and Mary is a stay-at-home mom. Well, if Bob's making contributions to his 401k while they're married, those are half Mary's. She's entitled to half of that. They don't necessarily need to take the money out of the 401k and give it to Mary, but Bob would have to, maybe she would get a larger portion of the savings account or the better car that's paid off, something like that, to balance that out. So even if it's in just his name, it's still half hers. Again, you run into the problem with the part marital, part non-marital. If Bob worked at 3M for 5 years before he got married and then worked there for 10 years, now you've got to figure out what portion was contributed after the marriage, what portion was of his the balance is due to an increase in the value of the first 5 years, to try to figure out where, what's the real number that we need to divide. So like I said, it can get confusing. As long as I would say try to stay on good terms, because the evaluation of all this stuff can eat up any money that you have to pay for experts to do tracing the money and everything. Okay, let's moving on. So marital property, again, almost anything you and your spouse own or received during the marriage. Now there's a sheet in the back. I'm trying to get it, which really looks obnoxious, and like your eye do not want to fill this out. I would say you should split up as much as you can as far as just basic household goods. You don't need to list, pots and pans, the blue couch or whatever on here. It's best to divide that up as best you can. And this is really used for bigger items. Another thing you might want to consider doing is paying down debt that you can if you have enough cash on hand. That way you don't have to worry about dividing the debts as well. So here, stocks. If you have a business, get a lawyer. That can be a mess. Make sure you agree on what things are worth. If you have one person filling this form out and he's like, well, I always say we'll say she this time. She says, I want the snowmobile, and so I think that's worth, $1,000. And he's going to take the four-wheeler. Well, that's worth, at least $1,500, even though they're worth the same. Let's say they were both worth $1,250. That's just kind of human nature a little bit, especially when you're seeing how little you're going to have after the divorce. Is to say, like, I need more, I should get a little bit extra cash because that four-wheeler is better than the snowmobile. So you kind of have to make sure you agree on what things are worth so it can be as equal as possible. Let's see, and then there's more things on here. Life insurance, if there's any cash surrender value. Here's all your debts. That can be depressing. Let's just go back up here. So when you're done with that and you fill out the debts and how you're going to divide that, and that's another thing, if someone's going to take on a credit card, you got to make sure you get your name off of that account. You don't want to have it, tied to you still, and just trust that he or she is going to keep making payments. You want to get those debts into each person's name as quickly as possible after the divorce. Here we're back at spousal maintenance again. Definitely you need to talk to an attorney if you're going to be getting spousal maintenance. If you feel like you should get spousal maintenance, but your spouse, I'm going to say husband because that's normally how it goes. The husband says, no, we're not going to do that. It's really not fair. I think you're being unreasonable, and you're kind of on the fence. Make sure you talk to an attorney, because when you do this Karen waiver, Karen v. Karen, that's why it's called the Karen waiver. It's because of this case. You can never change it. And the same way thing goes for if you agree to pay spousal maintenance at a set amount, you can never change it. So make sure you talk to an attorney before you agree to that, because that is something that can't be changed. So anyway, that's pretty detailed. Insurance coverage. If both people have insurance availability through their work, then it's best for you just to each be in charge of your own. However, you can still maintain the spousal insurance through your former spouse. But you really need to look into that and make sure you understand how that coverage works. And especially if the spouse who's going to be providing insurance is employed by a city, a county, or the state of Minnesota, it's critical that the employer is notified of the divorce within 60 days of the entry of decree. Another attorney just had sent out an email about that they have this 60-day window, and if you don't notify them, that's it. So you need to make sure you're really on top of that. If it were me, the person who's going to be getting insurance under my former spouse's coverage, I would be the one to say, I need the phone numbers and I'll take care of that myself. To make sure you get in there and it's covered, and you're not just assuming that they're doing it. I would make sure you're on top of that. Here's your last little paragraph to add whatever you want. to your agreement. Pretty much, there's just the two of you, so maybe you don't have, maybe you have a pet. What else? Really anything. You can pretty much say, put anything you need to say in there. But that's about it. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, I would hope, for the most part. They try to make it easy, and this is just all yada 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 stuff. And you have to sign it in front of a notary, things like that, and then you submit it to the judge. Now there are, up here was the real estate form you need to add if you're going to do the real estate. Like I said, it was at the end of the form. You have to do one of these for every single piece of real estate you own. Definitely make sure you use the full legal description exactly. And here, again, it's pretty self-explanatory about, it's a checkbox type form. So, and there are instructions that are with this form online that you should also read. Then if you have any questions, you should definitely contact an attorney. Most of us offer a free consultation, although we're not going to get into in-depth answers. If you call us for a free consultation, it'd be more like what's going on, maybe a little advice about what the law states, but we can't really get into details about applying the law to your specific facts, because then we're putting ourselves at risk, and we really can't do that unless we're going to be representing you. So if you have any questions, though, you can feel free to contact me. My number and email address there is on the side, and I would be happy to speak with you. And I do offer kind of just advice-only services in addition to full representation. If you just want someone to look over your paperwork, to answer, help us figure out how we're going to divide the house, help us figure out what's marital, what's non-marital. It might take a few hours of my time. Maybe we'll do a couple meetings. That's a lot cheaper still than paying someone, I don't even know. If you agree on everything, even that could be a couple thousand. So you just need to really figure out what it is that you want, what questions you have, and you can just go to an attorney with just those limited areas and say, I just need help with this question. I just need you to review this. And that's all I need. I don't need you to go to court. I don't need you to complete the document for me. I just need a few questions answered. And many attorneys are willing to do that. Nowadays, it's really becoming a newer thing to do. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, good luck with your divorce.